Hi, I'm Laura, and this is the Solo Business Playbook podcast. If you're building a business on your own, thinking about starting to freelance, but feel like you have no idea what you're doing, then you're in the right place. I've taken the non-traditional path from the 9 to 5 into freelancing and now running my own business. And on this podcast, I'm sharing what's actually worked, what hasn't, and everything I'm still figuring out along the way. We'll talk about finding clients, growing your income, and building a solo business that actually supports your life without leaning into hustle culture, and with real stories from other freelancers and founders. So let's get into it. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Solo Business Playbook podcast. Today, I am joined by Jody Gilligan, founder of Arvo, which is a neighbourhood sauna and plunge based in East London. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today, and thank you for coming on, firstly.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be a part of it.
So I'm interested kind of before we get started and before we dive too much into Arvo, just to hear a bit more about your backstory and like what you were doing before you started building Arvo.
Yeah, of course. So originally I'm Australian, but I've been in London now for 7 years. And I moved mainly for my career. I worked in tech, in growth marketing within tech. And it's not that there isn't a tech industry in Australia, but at least in Melbourne, it's a lot smaller than it is in
Mm.
London. So I really moved over for my career. The previous company before starting Albo, I was head of growth at a software company, essentially. I was there for about 4 years and joined pre-seed and saw it through to Series A. So it was part of that sort of venture capitalist funding and
Mhm.
high growth, which was amazing. I think I really enjoyed the initial periods of starting something. And then as it grew and grew, I feel like maybe the mission was less important. And so I just started to find myself thinking about what else I could do. But essentially, I had a team of 5. So the whole marketing side of the company was what I led. So we had field marketing, product marketing, paid content and data life cycle. So that's kind of what I oversaw. And it was software. So it was a free product. So there was a lot of product centric components to our job because our job was to get the free people to paid as well as traditional marketing. So that's what the realm I worked in was, exposure to the whole marketing flywheel, essentially, and that is what my degree is in, and that's what I've always done. But I think just before Arvo, it was quite a high pressure job. I had
Mhm.
quite a large team. I was one of the founding employees, so it was very visible, which is great if that's what you want to continue on within your career. I was given a lot of opportunities there, but my lifestyle was very like super early mornings, go to like a really
Mhm.
intense like cycle or Barry's class, go to the office until 6:30, go home, like work more. So it just
Yeah.
there was not much balance, but yeah, I actually met Will at that company, who is my
Oh,
co.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. And so where did the idea for Arvo come from then amongst all of that?
Yeah, so I think what it was, I basically just have well, I shouldn't say always, but for the last several years have found myself in saunas at a time in my life when I needed to slow down or I just needed to take
Mhm.
a beat. Essentially, the sauna for me is the only place that I can be quiet in my brain because I'm so hot that all I'm thinking about is how hot I am. Which sounds so silly and simple, and it is really silly and simple, and I think that's the beauty of it, but essentially, like I just mentioned, my days were extremely full. I felt high
Mhm.
pressure. It was always more we could be doing, and so after work, I'd truly just go to my local gyms. Sauna was in
Mhm.
the change rooms, and I'd just sit there, and my whole demeanor would shift after that, and it would be really what helped me sleep and helped me just kind of deal with the life I'd chosen to live in London, which I
Yeah.
hate that concept that I was, like, 28 and dealing with a life.
Yeah.
Like, so ridiculous, but essentially, so from a personal perspective, saunas really, really helped me mentally be okay or feel well enough to kind of wake up and do it again. Obviously, there's a lot of physical benefits, but that, to be honest, wasn't the primary reason I was doing it. It helped with sleep, but mainly it helped with just my brain. And then I guess coupled with that is in Melbourne, which is where I grew up and where my family and friends still are mostly. Probably over the last decade, bathhouses have just been popping up,
Yep.
and it's a real yeah, which I'm sure you know. It's just a real alternative to kind of going to the bar or even going to the beach, or it's just an activity essentially that you can
Yeah.
do by yourself or you can do with your pals, which I was getting a lot of exposure to when I'd go back and visit. And I felt London was really missing that.
Yeah.
Obviously, the last sort of 2 years, there has become a market with bathhouses in London, which is amazing. I think communities sauna baths are amazing, and what they're doing in each borough is great, making it accessible for people to experience the joy and the simplicity of of sauna. But I think what was happening for me was, I guess, just like a perfect storm, which I'm sure probably most people you speak to that go and take the leap experienced of I had this sort of tool that was helping me not survive, but, like, thrive.
Mhm.
I had this world in Melbourne that I loved and saw such success with my
Yeah.
friends, and then I had, like, a difficult year last year just with my parents in Melbourne weren't well, and so it was, like, this point in my life where I had to decide, did I wanna stay in London and go full throttle with this career in tech, or did I
Yeah.
was that making me happy? Do I wanna move home? What do I wanna do? And I think ultimately, I love London. I love living here. I love the proximity to the rest of the world. I also
Yeah.
love, like, the opportunities and the energy that this city has. I don't love the burnout that a lot of people experience, and I just thought, if I wanna make living here worth it in terms of, like, being so far from my loved ones, then maybe I should try something.
Yeah.
Like I said, I met Will at previous company who's my partner, and he has a real keen interest in wellness and also just starting something himself. So it all fell into place, at least from the idea perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. And there's so many points I was like nodding along and agreeing to you there because I do feel like one thing, having lived in both London and Australia,
Mhm.
that one of the main things I noticed about my life in Australia was how much better the work-life balance was compared to my life in London, and just how easy it is to get swept up in corporate life, burnout, and just prioritizing work above anything else.
Yeah.
And one thing I started doing when I first moved to Australia was going to the bathhouses, and I was like, "Why don't these exist back home?" I mean, this was back in 2023 when I moved to Australia, and I left London in 2021, so I feel like, yeah, back then, I hadn't heard of any bathhouses in
No.
London.
Yeah.
Um, and I love the concept of it. There's a couple here, but I completely agree with you. I don't know if it's like you don't take your phone in there, you're so hot, it's all you can think about, like you said, but it is just such a good way to switch off. And I feel like in somewhere like London, it's so hard to find those places where you can switch off without going to the pub and having a drink. Like,
Totally. Yeah. It's like both ends of the extreme. Obviously, like, we'll all love the park in London in summer, and that
yeah,
nothing's ever replacing that. And we all love the pub to a degree, but I think London, because it's a global city, I'm sure, experienced, like, it takes little pieces from other global cities. So,
yeah,
like, it's like the hustle culture of New York, and then I feel
mhm,
like New York's wellness scene is so high end that
yeah,
London is taking cut parts of that, which then makes it inaccessible for people to access. And I think
yeah,
really not rocket science. I think, like, I'm really glad that a lot of the conversation in the wellness world is moving towards just, like, the simple things, like real food,
yeah,
good sleep, movement, and then
yeah,
like, hot and cold is such a great way to get so many of those points, like, in your ring circle full. So, yeah, I think it's just a great juxtaposition between the hustle and bustle and busyness, and London asks so
for
much of
sure.
you, your job might ask so much of you. You're stuck
Yeah.
on a tube, so just, like, just be sit.
Yeah. And also the fact that it's year round, because like you say, the parks in London during the summer are amazing, but for half the year it's raining, it's cold. You might go for a quick walk around the park, but you're not going to spend a lot of time somewhere where you can truly switch off. Whereas, yeah, sauna and a plunge you can do year round, which is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, so was there like a moment, yeah, after you met Will and you kind of were talking about the idea, was there a moment where you were like, let's do this, let's go all in? Do you remember that moment at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm trying to think if there was like a specific pin drop moment. I don't think there was one big moment. I think it was just
Mm.
the slow burn of discontentment and being like dissatisfied with my day to day. And I think I'm just a real believer in, I don't love the idea that people go on holidays to escape their life. I want to
Yeah,
live a life where I don't need to escape it. And I hadn't experienced that much in my life, to be fair. Like, I have enjoyed my life and I enjoyed my job for years, but I just was really unhappy, essentially, and at a place where I turned like, we were turning 30, and it was, I guess, just a crossroads, kind of what I touched on before,
yeah,
but there wasn't one moment. It was a slow burn to just sort of becoming so fed up that you do something
yeah.
about it.
Yeah, and I think, like you said earlier, I do think that's like quite common with founders. Is it's not necessarily like you wake up one morning and you're like, oh my God, this is it, I'm gonna do it. It is kind of like a long, slow feeling of something's just not sitting right anymore, and also do more with like what I care about. And I don't want to keep just like working myself to the bone for something that I can take it or leave it anyway.
100%. And I also think it'd be interesting, like when you once I listen to the episodes you have coming out with people that are more product based. I don't know if that means software or not, but also I feel like 2025 was a year of, and 2024 was just so much change in tech, and obviously AI is
Mm.
everywhere. And my job was uncertain last year, like
Yeah,
whether my bosses would tell me or not, it definitely was, and it would be today, and it will be next year. And so it's like, okay, do you bank on the uncertainty of an industry that is so much bigger than you in a world that really, like, we existed to help major corps bottom line
yeah.
increase percent, and I'm like, do the major corps need me? They don't,
It's
and
the
replace
yeah.
me. So I guess that's probably like a self-centered component of why I wanted to do it, but I think
Mm.
realistically, Will as well, we wanted to work with people more, and we both were commercial roles within our companies, which I suppose is
Yeah,
like a tiny mini version of working with people, but we wanted to work with people doing something we knew would help them feel well at the end of the day.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also something that has more of like a community feel to it rather than, like you say, just lining the pockets of people who don't need more money.
Yeah, 100%, and I think sort of touching on what I mentioned of this space where I was thinking about, do I go back to Melbourne? Do I stay in London? I have had amazing friends in London, but it's very cyclical. A lot of people are on visas, a
Mhm.
lot of people move. Like, your average person in London is not going to stay in London for the next
Yeah,
25 years.
yeah,
It really was keen to like live where I was and actually be in the neighborhood that I lived in rather than just use it as a base. So, yeah, I guess all of it was just a combination.
yeah. And so what did when you first told people, friends and family, like what your plan was and what you were doing, what was everyone's first reactions?
Yeah, I think my parents are really supportive people.
Yeah, love
Which
that.
I'm very grateful and lucky to have. They weren't surprised that I wanted to do something myself, and I
Yeah.
think probably I'd been very open with them about how I was feeling about my job and London and everything. So they were definitely very supportive and not shocked that I wanted to do something myself. Probably shocked that I was thinking of doing something physical, given
Mhm.
one, my entire background has nothing to do with a physical space, and
Yeah.
two, I feel like the whole conversation in society has not much to do with physical businesses, and it's all about, like,
Yeah.
digital products or beauty products or whatever, like, at units,
Yeah.
which wasn't something we were doing. So I think maybe that's where most of the questions came from of, like, how do you know anything about it? How are you gonna afford anything
Mhm.
like that? What if it doesn't work? Everything like that. But, fundamentally, I think definitely supportive, and I think my friends as well, they were really excited. I think probably similar to you, I'm sure you've met so many people, like, in their late 20s, early 30s, late 30s, where they're just not loving their day to day.
Yeah.
So people I feel like are really supportive of taking the courage to actually try something new.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I'd say overall, both Will and I are very lucky that we didn't really have naysayers around us. And maybe part of that is because of probably not, we're not like a first mover in London. So, the
Yeah.
industry or like the sauna community has grown in the last few years. It's grown across the whole country.
Yeah.
So maybe that, I wonder if it was 2 years ago, people would be like, why would anyone go to a public
Yeah.
sauna? I'm
I
sure that.
mean, yeah, and I also feel like there's so many Aussies in London anyway that even if it was 2 years ago, they
Yeah,
may have been like your first cheerleaders because they
yeah,
know from back home like how good it is, and it might have been something they were missing.
yeah,
And then they would then bring the Brits on board and everyone
yeah,
else.
yeah, yeah, right, you're right. Yeah, I'm sure that's right. There would have been other ways because there's also the performance side, which isn't necessarily what we're targeting at all, but a couple years ago, you'd still have those
Yeah.
that would know what contrast therapy is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And that kind of leads me on quite nicely to my next question because you mentioned like your parents having questions about being in a physical space. And I find it really interesting. And I get why a lot of people see starting a business is like super risky.
Mm.
And on the flip side, I always say to someone, but it's not really any more risky than putting all your eggs in one basket with one company and one salary that they're going to always need you and not suddenly make you redundant or replace you with AI.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I do think that having a physical bricks and mortar business is still seen as like the riskiest option you can do for a business.
Yeah.
Even like product stores quite often these days start online, whether that's like a Shopify store or something like that, and then may eventually go into a physical store. Or they've got like a super local community and perhaps open like a cafe or something like that. But I do think there is just still this mystery that surrounds brick and mortar.
Yep.
Um, and so I wanted to get into like the first stages of building Arvo and how that looked and what you were doing like in those first few months.
Yeah, definitely. I can speak on how we could afford it
Yeah,
as
that
well.
would be
I
super
think
helpful, I think.
Yeah, I think without thinking about how you can actually afford it, you actually can't do it. And I think how
Yeah.
you just said, you can play around with the Shopify, you can play around with Squarespace. You might lose like $150 with setting it up and getting your
Mhm.
first thing available in your time, of course, but otherwise the barrier of entry is so low. I
Yeah.
think that's what it is. It's the barrier of entry for bricks and mortar, which just turns people away immediately. And I totally understand it. Also, there's risks of all the businesses that were so impacted by COVID. Like, we hope that won't happen again, but the world circumstance really dictates how successful the high street is. And the high
Yeah.
street is like dying, as we know. So, before we did anything, what we really wanted to do was a neighborhood bathhouse. But we also had sort of plans 2 and 3 of, like, if we couldn't end up affording that, do we want to just sort of enter into the sauna space, but do it by being, like,
Mhm.
sauna masters or actually being facilitators in other people's spaces?
Mhm.
There were other angles we explored, but essentially, we had savings. So Arvo is funded partly by each of our savings and partly
Yeah.
by a startup loan, which is the British Business Bank's loan. It's a personal loan, and they give it to essentially anyone wanting to start a business that will help the UK's economy.
Mm.
Everyone's eligible if you've not received it before. So you can borrow up to £25,000, which Will and I both did. So that immediately is £50,000.
Yeah, wow.
We more than matched that with our savings. And my savings was just because, I mean, it was all personal savings. I had
Mm.
invested from when I was young, and I literally went to £30. So we used everything that we
Wow.
had our name. Yeah, literally. It's that part's maybe crazy, and it's one that we don't think about too much. We think
Yeah, no, don't spend any time thinking about
yeah,
that.
like holy shit. Yeah. So it was a huge risk, but I guess I can talk a little bit more to the fundamentals of the funding, but actually maybe before that, Will and I are from a position of, if we lost everything, we will always have somewhere to live. And I think that that's
Yeah.
really an important thing to note, that I can totally understand how risky bricks and mortar is compared to digital products, full stop. But I can
Yeah.
particularly understand it when you have dependents, or if
Yeah.
you have mortgage, or if you have significant debt, or if you don't have any family and friends in the place you live that you could rely upon. So our baseline of our starting point was already about as healthy as it could be, because we don't have a
Yeah.
mortgage, we don't have children, we don't have a home, we have parents and family that we can live with. So I would say that that is an important caveat that gave us freedom. And I hate that that's the case, but it is the case. And so
Yeah.
I do think that's important. But otherwise, yeah, the British Business Bank startup loan would highly recommend. You basically pick how much, like the amount in which you think you'll need, as much as we could get. So we both maxed
Yeah.
out 25 grand, and it's 6% interest over 6 years. So it ends up being like £480 a month for 6 years,
Yeah.
which is actually like okay when you think about it, really. It's a really low interest rate compared to
Yeah.
loans you could get from your bank. And then at the same time, when you're sort of first picking whether to take that loan, they're quite flexible. Let's say the lease didn't go through, or something happened in your personal life where you could no longer take the leap, you can
Mm.
pay it back in one lump sum. So as long as you don't,
Yeah. Wow.
you are not worse off. You can't get it again, but it's a pretty favorable loan, I would say,
Yeah.
because it just provides a lot of flexibility, but it is a personal loan. So if you don't pay it off, your credit score will be impacted and things like
Yeah, like you're personally liable. And is there anything like I'm interested in like the logistics of it? Because I recently helped one of my Australian clients get funding for their
that.
business, and there
Mm,
was like milestone reports and updates.
mm.
Is there anything you have to like adhere to, or is it just a case of applying, getting approved, here's the loan, pay it back, or
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's what you said. So
Yeah, wow.
you have to apply for the loan.
Yeah.
So application includes the business plan. And the business plan itself was pretty robust. I definitely recommend taking your time with it if it's something that someone listening to this would want to do. It basically goes through a series of questions about starting with kind of like the goals for the business. What is your service or product? What is your pricing structure? What is your revenue forecast? Who are your target audience? Where do you plan to exist if physical? Why? And it sort of asks you, okay, month 0 to 3, how much do you think you'll earn and spend? So it's basically just like a mock P&L sheet
Yeah.
create. And I think probably Will and I's background in commercial teams at scrappy startups, I've never
Hmm.
done a business plan before, but like I've done a product roadmap or a campaign plan.
Yeah.
That wasn't that foreign to me. So I can imagine it could be foreign if you were coming, if you're a baker and you're wanting to open a bakery,
Yeah.
that would be quite foreign. But another great thing about the British Business Bank is that they offer you essentially like a spokesperson the entire time. So they will help you, they'll give you feedback on the state of the business plan. If anything doesn't make sense,
Mm.
they want you to be able to receive it. So they basically have a team
Yeah.
in place that, yeah, essentially helps you succeed, which I think is amazing as well. And I think you have 3 months from saying you want to apply for the loan and therefore getting the resources in return to
Yeah.
actually the loan closing. So you do have time as well. But yeah, we ended up accepting the loan before we had the lease, which is probably not
Mhm.
recommended because that could always fall through. But like a matter of like a 10-day period, and it also changes. So if you're accepted in September, at the interest rate that they had in September, that locks in. But if you decide, okay, I have to wait another month, and then you get accepted in 2 months' time in November,
Mm.
be like a 12% interest rate.
Yeah,
I,
wow.
but yeah,
Okay. That's really interesting. And I feel like it will definitely be helpful for a lot of people that are listening because I think funding and money is one of the main things that does hold people back from starting businesses. And I think people forget that there are options out there for help. You don't have to self fund everything. So that's amazing. And thank you for sharing all of that. And so you mentioned your lease, and this is another thing that I do see in like the very limited information I see about physical businesses online. But one thing that I do see that tends to be the thing that catches first time founders out is commercial leasing, business rates, and things like that. And they're still even foreign concepts for me because I've never had a physical business. So I'm really interested to hear what your experience with those, and like even just finding the space for Arvo as well, and that process there.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think almost by nature, there's not much information because of how gray an area it is. Like in startups, I feel like the equity conversation is so gray because no one understands it, or the way that investments are spoken about is so gray. And it's like, it doesn't actually have to be that complicated, but it's complicated
Yeah.
by design almost. So I'll try and think about it in a way that's maybe like from a timeline perspective, but I suppose just like everyone that hasn't done it before, we had no idea what we were doing. We didn't know what we were looking for. So I think from a very baseline perspective, the most helpful thing you could do is just go to other businesses doing something similar to what you want to open to see even just like the size of space that they have,
Mm.
because that's then one concrete piece of like filtration that you can add to your property search, which is
Yeah.
so simple and anyone can do that. So I'd say like step one is, okay, if you're opening a restaurant, how many seats do you want in your restaurant? How do you figure that out? You go to a restaurant and then you kind of try and understand the size. I didn't even know like what a square foot was before we looked for this space. So that I said would say is step one. And for me, there's a bathhouse in Melbourne called Inner Studio, which is in Collingwood in a north suburb. And it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's sort of open plan. It's an old, I think it was car garage. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so like just freestanding,
Yep.
detached, their roof is their roof, there's no one above them, and really like wide entries and exits where cars had been. So that was a baseline type of building that I had seen worked really well for what we wanted to do, and obviously worked well for them because it's doing well. So I sort of thought, okay,
Yeah.
that's a nice type of building to look for. So we thought we were looking for industrial units, but even then, that was a total waste of time because industrial units is a type of property in the UK, and typically they don't have the use class required for a
Mm.
commercial business. So you need a use class E to run a commercial business. So like whether you're a greengrocer, a spa, a gym,
Yeah.
whatever, if you're taking payment, you need use class E. So that was like a pretty quick learning. I can't remember
Mm.
exactly how we figured that out. I mean, looking back now, it sounds silly that we didn't know that, but we truly didn't.
I mean,
Um,
I'm learning so much already
yeah,
from you. So
I would say that that's kind of like 2 filter points you now have. So if you're on Zoopla or LoopNet or whatever website, we just were using the marketplace like property search sites. 2 filter points were the size of building we wanted. So we were looking from anywhere from 1,800 square feet to 3,000. We wanted it ground floor because that, I guess, was just something an assumption by us that even just things arriving and exiting from a delivery perspective, we wanted it to be ground floor, but
yeah.
also water typically would be
Yeah.
better on a ground floor, and then use class E. So that was kind of 3 filter points that we had, and immediately things really shrink of what's available.
Mm.
A lot of the UK businesses or commercial use class E's are found on high streets. We didn't wanna be on a high street, so that was another kind of, like, X against any
Mhm.
building, and so then it was down to area for us, so that obviously, hopefully by this point, you've had to think about who your target market is and therefore what kind of area you want to exist in. That's obviously really important thinking for a physical business because you can't move it, so you're either
Yeah.
gonna ask people to travel a long way or you're actually just gonna be where they already are. So definitely would recommend to be where they already are as much as you can control that. But we had a really wide net in terms of sort of our target market. We were looking for people who worked in the city or worked in London, had careers, maybe worked from home 2, 3 days a week,
Yeah.
were typically 30 plus or between 30 and 45, had disposable income, probably had a gym membership, but weren't running ultra marathons or,
Mhm.
weren't necessarily totally looking for recovery suites, but were looking for wellness spaces.
Yeah.
And we landed on Walthamstow because, one, we didn't live far from Walthamstow to begin with, and Walthamstow, in terms of everything I just said, it matches. It was quite a natural place we were already thinking about. But we also looked like in Queen's Park, in Wandsworth. There's a lot of other areas around London that
Hmm.
you find that. And if you were to flip that, where I was really looking for performance-based athletes in their 20s, there's like several places in London that you could do that as
Yeah.
well. So that really, those things really basically dictated our search, the area and then
Yeah.
the type of building we were looking for. And then it was really just reaching out. So I'd love to say that just like when you're buying a home, you might contact an estate agent and they care to share homes hitting the market. We did not have that luxury. I don't think estate agents take you seriously in your first business. We also had no outside
Yeah.
investment, and I think they think that that equals success. So
Yep.
it was quite difficult getting estate agents to take us seriously or to, it's not that they didn't care, but they didn't do anything above like
Yeah. They didn't go
going.
above and beyond to help you.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
that was maybe like a little bit of a barrier that did get us down, me particularly, because you're really just trying to bring your like vision into reality. And they are a blocker in you doing that, of course. So you want them on your side and they're not on your side, but they're also not necessarily, at least our experience, weren't
Yeah.
helpful. But the agent that we worked with to find, like with the lease we now have, was great. And we, yeah, just got really lucky finding our space. It basically hit on all of the markers. And yeah, it's like the perfect building for what we want.
Yeah. I love it. like from what I've seen on TikTok, and I've really enjoyed seeing your posts on the renovations as well, and like the before
Yeah.
and after images.
Yeah.
I love like the jungle vibe with all the plants. I also really love, I can't remember if you touched on it earlier, but the fact that you do have those two saunas. So you've got like the social one and the quiet one as well. So when it came to the fit out of the building itself, how did you find that? Did you do like a lot of it yourself or did you hire contractors?
Hmm. Yeah, we did a lot of it ourselves. So I'd say, again, maybe one thing is I quit my job too soon, which meant that there was this period of months where I wasn't working. We thought the lease was about to be signed. It took way longer than we thought it would have. It was something like it got taken off the market in August. We thought we were going to sign in November, so I quit in October. We signed in February. So there was like a 2-3 month period there where all I had to do was focus on, if we get this building, what do I want it to look like exactly? What's possible? What should the layout be? Like, where should drains be? How big should the saunas be? How many ice baths? So I had quite a lot of time to think about what we wanted the space to look like. And personally, I have a real keen interest in design and in
Hmm.
construction and renovation. I think a lot of Australians do. Like, you're exposed to it so much in Australia. So
Yeah.
whilst I'd never done it before, it wasn't like this big, huge, scary thing for me to think about. So going into the day we got the keys, we had done a lot of thinking. And we had the floor plan. We knew that floor plan would meet regulations of like accessibility or
Hmm.
fire routes and things like that. So we'd done a lot of research and worked with an architect to make sure that we would pass the council's regulations from that standpoint, which is obviously really important. And I'd say is for sure a key step in the fit out is you don't need an architect, you don't need an interior designer, you don't need these things. But from an architect's perspective, she helped us understand just the basic needs for a commercial
Yeah.
space in London to pass building control. So
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, even when you're saying now, like, where the drains would go and the fire exits and things like that, like, that's so obvious. But
yeah,
even I was like, oh my God, yeah, wow, I hadn't,
yeah,
hadn't even thought of
yeah,
that.
yeah, no,
Um,
totally. And we were like umming and ahhing whether we needed to bring in a professional for that. But we just met her on Upwork. So she was a freelance up.
yeah.
She was in London, which we liked because she had the ability to actually come and see the space. And it was like a 3-week project for her.
Yeah.
Mostly because we knew what we wanted. So we didn't go to her with a blank page of figure out like we want a bathhouse, this is the building, create it. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
this is the building, this is what we want. Does that work from a building control
Yeah.
perspective? And she actually then helped create like visualizations of the floor plan, which I think from a marketing perspective were really key. So that might be something
Mm.
people could like ask their architect of as well, like the visualizations that they would create for typical clients. But that's essentially the beginning of the fit out. We knew what we wanted going into it. And then Will's brother-in-law is a carpenter and he's amazing.
Very
So
handy. Very handy.
he's so handy. ABC Carpentry is the best. So he came and lived with us for 2 weeks and only 2 weeks. And he kind of erected like all of the stud walling that we needed and got a lot of things done for us to then bring in other tradesmen to take off what Alex had left.
Mhm.
So that was great because again, we have a friendly person, but I wouldn't say you need that at all. That Alex was the only tradesman we knew personally.
Yeah.
And then we just worked with single trades. So we had a single plumber, we had a single electrician, and then we had our joiners who built our saunas on site. So it was a really like small team. Also, I think we did get lucky with the quality of work from these tradesmen. Obviously, we knew Alex would be great. We didn't know about the others. We'd obviously done
Yeah.
research and tried to make sure they were well reviewed, but we'd never worked with them before. So I think that that's really important, that the quality of your building is going to be based on the quality of the craftsmanship, which is obviously the
Yeah.
quality of your trades. So we did take our time meeting a lot of different electricians, a lot of different plumbers, talking them through the job. It's not a common use case. So like it was the first bathhouse our electrician did. It was the first
Mhm.
bathhouse our plumber had done. So that was a risk for sure. Whereas you might not have that same risk if you're opening a cafe or
Yeah.
a yoga studio potentially. So if I could, and it was a bigger industry, I would definitely go with a team that has already done that fit out before because then there's just a lot less figuring things out. For example, one place we got really hit with was like drainage and ventilation is a really important component of a wet
Yeah,
building.
definitely.
Yeah. And we had, because of that, as part of building control, when you submit your plans, which everyone has to do, you have to have, like, I think it's F of the building control documents are all about ventilation. You need like proper calculations of how your air quality is ventilated, which is so above my head, obviously. I
Yeah,
don't know
wow.
how to figure that out. So you have to go to these like big M&E contractors. I had one call and I was like on this laptop and I was like on the 100th floor of some building in a boardroom with the gherkin behind it. And I was like, there's no way I can afford whatever you're about to say.
Yes.
That was really finding an M&E consultant was really difficult. And the one we worked with ended up not working out in terms of what they suggested is not what we did. But I suppose the quality of your trades is what helped us figure things out. So our plumber
Yeah.
and having a mechanical engineer contact that helped us figure out that we didn't have enough water supply. So we put water tanks in and we have a hot water tank as well. So little things like that where it's not a plumber's job to know that, but we
Yeah.
were lucky in that making sure that, you know, just ask your trades if they know anyone in this space, ask if they can help
Yeah.
with ventilation, ask if they can help with decoration. They have been doing this for years, so they have met people that you don't know. So I'd
Yeah,
say
for
if
sure.
I can trust your tradesman, that is a great way to meet other trades that help you fill in the gaps that you need. And we
Yeah.
identified the gaps by looking at what building control, like what Walthamstow Council needed from us that we didn't have.
Yeah. Wow, that is a lot. And like so much that I hadn't even considered or thought about or even heard of before. And yeah, it's crazy how you kind of see the finished place, whether that is, like you say, bathhouse, cafe, shop, yoga studio, and you just do not appreciate every little detail that went into making that come to life.
Yeah.
Um, And you kind of mentioned it earlier when you said that about quitting your job a little bit too soon, but was there any moment where you were like, "Shit, what have we gotten ourselves into?"
I think definitely not during the build or since opening, but just before we got that lease, like January,
Yeah.
there was no reason for it to take as long as it did other than just these things take a long time.
Mm.
And so that was a tough month because we couldn't make any progress. So I felt like I was really wasting time not making not being able to pay my rent and really unsure whether the lease would actually go through and therefore, like, what would that mean for us and what had we done? I just left everything.
Yeah.
We'd moved to Walthamstow banking on the lease. So that was a period of a lot it was a really difficult period, a lot of questioning, a lot of doubting. But as soon as we started work, I think we had, like, very positive feelings towards it.
Yeah. And I guess, like, slowly seeing your vision coming to life is, like, so motivating and, like, exciting as well, because 'cause you're then like, "Can't wait until this is done. I can't wait until we can start opening," and, like, welcoming people through the doors. And you obviously mentioned you came from a marketing background. Did you have a strategy pre-launch of, like, how you wanted to promote the bathhouse, and was there, like, a wait list process and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think basically as soon as we got the keys, I started going to work to build an audience on primarily Instagram, and that was because that is the channel that fit our target audience, so it could be different for other businesses, but for us, it was Instagram. It's where the age group I spoke about and the type of like, the archetype of person spends time, and in terms of, like, the strategy of how I wanted to portray Arvo, at that point, it was SoCals, but that's a different story. Um, it was, like, the neighborhood bathhouse that didn't exist essentially in
Yeah.
London. It's kind of what we were leaning upon, and I was really trying to talk to the person that we now have attracted. So those parents that need an hour to themselves, or those lawyers or creatives that work all hours and different and even shift work that just need that moment. So I was trying to portray a real calm environment, and I touched on it earlier, but at least a visual asset that worked really well for us to build interest was showing people like the 2D floor plan versus the 3D renders versus like the
Yeah.
AI generated renders. So we worked with our graphic designer, Stan, who did our brand, so like the logo and the colors, on how to visualize the renders that we had, like the architect's renders, which really
Mhm.
brought it to life. So I would say that if you wanted to market a physical space before it existed, so whilst it was still a building site, using AI to generate renders was really, really powerful for us. And I notice
Yeah.
news sources still use our AI renders, which I don't know how to take. So I'm like, guys,
Wow.
please now, like, don't use the renders, but and in the same way, it was also motivating for me because we were like, shit, people love it. It really has to
Yeah.
look that good. So if you know the feeling of the space you want to create, which we very much did, we wanted it to be like airy. We wanted it to be bringing the outside in. So we want it to be very green. We want it to be open. We wanted there to be space for people to rest. We wanted there to be space for people to mingle and chat. And we wanted it above all else to just feel very human. Um,
Mm.
those were all kind of like feelings and prompts that I was feeding Gemini to create
Yeah.
renders of our space. So that was really helpful from like a launch strategy because they knew the building because it was like quite a well-known restaurant before we took the lease over. They were all very interested in what was happening because it had sat empty for months, and then they could
Mhm.
see how the renders would actually work inside that space.
Yeah.
But other than that, in terms of actually attracting people, we didn't do anything paid. I really was very manual and old school and was finding local gyms, local business owners, local cafes that I thought, again, our target audience would frequent. And then I was interacting with the people that interacted with those businesses online.
Yeah.
So I was just following them and liking them and probably being a bit of a pest online, but in a way that got us noticed. And I think maybe one part of the world that Arvo exists in and the confidence we have that we make people feel better, I felt quite shameless about sharing it.
Mm.
I knew what we were doing was good and good for
Yeah.
people. So it wasn't like, you know, there was no guilt in doing that because
Yeah.
which I think was very
Everyone's going to benefit.
yeah, which I don't know that I had in my corporate career. I felt a
Yeah.
little bit more like, "Oh, is this imposing something they don't want?" And I
Mm.
didn't know they wanted Arvo, but I knew that they would potentially appreciate what we were creating. So really it was honestly like, I'd say 85, 90% Instagram driven. And from Instagram, I was also running quite a lot of polls on just on
Hmm.
stories, trying to engage the audience, asking things like pricing or opening hours or trying to think of like women's only sessions or what kind of
Hmm.
events they want to see and trying to really build that anticipation of what we were trying to create whilst also understanding what they wanted at the same time. And like what day we closed per week was decided by our audience in March and we opened in late April. So they
Yeah.
really did make decisions for us because we wanted them to. So I'd say engaging an
Yeah.
audience was great. And then from that engagement, I launched like a waitlist, simple landing page on Squarespace. It just captured their name and email, and what they would receive was first access to bookings, discounted rates. It was £10 we did because we did like a soft opening week.
Hmm.
Um, so everyone that had followed us from February 1st was invited to come on April 11th. So it was like a 10-week fit out period and they were invited to come at a £10 rate all through the week. And that was really helpful for us because we then had, yeah, like a email list of 2,000 by the point of launching waitlist week, which I think we did
Yeah, that's amazing.
yeah, yeah. I think February 1st to March 8th, we got like 1,600 people on the list. And then March 8th, we started selling waitlist tickets for April 11th, so a month out. And then between March and April, we continued to build that waitlist. So by the end, it was about 2,000 people, which allowed us to sell out waitlist week. So we had 700 people in the first 7 days come through.
Wow.
Yeah, which is really amazing. And I don't know what we thought we would have, but it definitely wasn't that.
Yeah.
Um, I think maybe I'm a little bit pessimistic from a marketing standpoint just because of being from that background, but followers didn't mean anything to me until they
Yeah.
actually put card information in.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
I said that really badly. Followers made everything.
I know what you mean though.
Didn't like give
Like a
nothing to me.
follower count doesn't translate to buyer intent is what,
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas Will was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing, like 2,000 people are gonna come," and I'm like, putting your email into something is not the same as putting your card details into something.
Yeah.
I put my email, like, here, there, and everywhere, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't put my card details here, there, and everywhere, so
Yeah.
we didn't know, but that was amazing, and that opening week, which I think is a very common strategy, and I would really recommend it, had we got so much feedback in that first 7 days,
Yeah.
which we've implemented, and I'd say I feel bad to a degree of the experience that some people had in that opening week because we just didn't know what we were doing compared to now, but I suppose
Yeah.
that's the point of it. But that was really, really helpful week to learn our customers, what they
Yeah.
wanted from Arvo, what we could change, and thankfully all of the feedback was very actionable, like small
Yeah. That's
improvements that
good.
we could make. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was everything to us. I think that build up to the wait list
Yeah.
because now, like, a lot of our members are people we met in those first 7 days.
That's awesome. And I think as well, there's a really nice feeling that you've given people by inviting them into the build and the story right from that point. And now they're almost probably like a bit emotionally invested in Arvo succeeding because they were like there from day one. So
Yeah.
there's like this additional layer of customer loyalty here because they've seen the journey, they feel like they were part of it. And also they did give you feedback that was implemented so they know their customers that are listened to. So, and I
Yeah.
just think all of those things are so valuable
Yeah.
both to customers and to business owners because it's really easy when it's your idea and your vision to get too close to it that you there was probably this situation for you where people had given feedback and you were like, oh, I hadn't even thought of that. And
Yes.
yeah,
100%.
obviously that makes sense. But you're sometimes just so close to the idea that you can't see the zoomed out picture, or you're not necessarily the one paying for it.
Mhm.
So there's like expectations when you're the one handing over money that, oh, actually, I would change that, or I'd let us have access to this, or change the opening hours to this because of these reasons. And it's so useful to have that information directly from the people that are going to buy from you, because you could post it on TikTok and get feedback from, you know, a 50-year-old man who's never going to come down and use the bathhouse. And like, what use is his feedback when he's not a customer anyway?
100.
Everyone's always going to have an opinion, but getting the feedback from the opinions that matter is like invaluable.
Totally. And I think like in the beginning of any business, like revenue is so much more important than reach,
Yeah.
because without revenue, we can't continue. You could say that about many businesses, but particularly physical spaces. Like we have rent to pay every month. We have business rates to pay every month. We have bills to pay every month. We can't just pause a digital product that we're selling. So right now, our entire focus is on how do we get like our immediate neighborhood knowing about Arvo, because they are the people that are going to come. So I totally agree with what you said, like gathering feedback from the people that matter most to you. It's not that people online
Yeah.
opinion doesn't matter, but it can't all matter the same. And I think it would be a bad idea for us to look for external feedback and validation over internal, which
Yeah.
seemed like an obvious statement, but I do think I've been guilty of it. Like you want that virality. You want people to know you
Hmm.
exist because you think it equals success. And
Yeah.
our TikTok, we had one video that went viral and it didn't do anything for bookings. So
Yeah.
like
This is the thing, because the more people you reach, especially as a local neighborhood bathhouse, the more people you reach, the higher chance that a lot of the people that you're reaching aren't nearby. And so, yeah, they may, for example, me, I'm like, I
yeah,
already know that once I'm back in the UK, I'm going to come straight down for a visit. But right now, I'm on the other side of the world. So it's
yeah,
not going to get you those immediate
yeah,
memberships sold or even day passes sold. And you may have like followers that are rooting for you from afar, but
totally.
followers, they're not going to pay the bills. So,
No, exactly. And like all of it's good, but yeah, there's
yeah.
levels to how much that good impacts your livelihood essentially.
Yeah.
So I think just trying to focus on that. And I'm really lucky that I have a partner in this, because
Hmm.
that those are the types of decisions where if I was just doing this by myself, well, I probably would have recognized that actually TikTok doesn't do much for
Yeah.
on the day sales. So I'm going to just discount doing that because I don't have the time to do
Yeah.
anything. I have the luxury of not having to do that because I have Will. And I'd say actually another thing that maybe is part of the community that we've built from the wait list to now 3 months in is that it is just Will and I there. So we don't have any staff.
Mm.
We run Arvo totally. We have a cleaner, a
Yeah.
suite, but otherwise it is just us. So people have really bought into us as people as well. But even on that, I'd say like maybe a minor regret that I would encourage people doing more of is whether you like it or not. And I don't love that it's something that is everywhere now, but people really want to know the founders.
Mm. They do.
So I wish we did more from like a build perspective of showing what we were doing and kind of giving a peek behind the curtain. But I guess
Hmm.
I always wish you did more.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Amazing. I feel like there's so much more I could ask you, but we are already at the hour, which is crazy. So I guess to finish, is there something that you wish you'd known when you first started that you know now that you would share to anyone who's listening, who's thinking of, I guess specifically, they're dreaming of like a brick and mortar business?
Yeah. I'd say like overall, do it. I think if you're dreaming
Yeah.
of doing it, there's a reason you're dreaming of it. And I'm sure the vision that you have in your head is worth exploring. So I'd say first and foremost, go for it, even though it can seem very, like, very hard to access. And on that side, it is hard to access. So from a business perspective, I'd say don't quit your job too soon because you will need more money than you think you need. And I suppose in that sense, go easy on yourself from a financial perspective because you need to make a lot of money to be able to even pay yourself. So I think
Yeah.
unfortunately, like a factor of it all is you have to pour a lot of money into a physical space. So you really have to think about your personal survival for the first 12 months as if your business has failed almost, which
Yeah.
sounds so negative, but it isn't negative. I just think like a way to take it seriously. But yeah, from a personal perspective, I'd say definitely do it as much as you can because you will regret not doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. For everyone who's listening, where can they find you
Oh,
online?
so our socials are at arvo.sauna. We are mostly on Instagram and TikTok. And then our website is just www.arvosauna.co.uk.
Amazing. And I will link all of that in the description for the episode as well, so that people don't have to worry about trying to find you. They can just click straight through.
Cool.
Thank you so much for joining me. I've honestly learned so much in
Oh,
our
thank
conversation, and I've found it so interesting just hearing the story of Arvo. Yeah,
you. Oh, thanks. Yeah. And if anyone that has listened wants to know anything more, like you said, I think it's all a rabbit hole. So there's like all these pillars, but all of them have so much more to it. I'm more than happy to help.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So that's it for today's episode of the Solo Business Playbook podcast. If you found this episode helpful, it would mean a lot if you followed along or left a quick review because it really helps more people to find the show. And if you're building your own business right now, I'm right there with you. You can find more resources, behind the scenes, and ways to work with me in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.